covered a little bit last week. We talked about authority and jurisdiction last week. We talked about authority being a power and being authorized to act, to do something. We talked about how that for authority, you had to understand and stand under authority to ever be able to appropriately stand in authority. We talked about jurisdiction, and we talked about it in terms of the legal definition of jurisdiction, which is the limits or territory within which authority may be exercised. We talked about how that we have to engage God. We have to give God personal jurisdiction and subject matter jurisdiction over things in our lives. That's foundational for us to be able to engage in spirit wars. And now today, we're going to talk a little bit more about some of those rules of engagement. And we're going to be in the book of Joshua mainly. So if you want to turn there, you're more than welcome to. Here's where we are as we start today. We are in a place in the book of Joshua where Moses is dead. And Joshua is now leading. And he's been given very specific instructions with promises. Joshua chapter 1. After the death of Moses, the servant of the Lord said to Joshua, the son of Nun, Moses' assistant, Moses, my servant, is dead. Now therefore arise and go over this Jordan, you and all these people, into the land I am giving to them, to the people of Israel. Every place that the sole of your foot will rest upon, I have given to you, just as I promised to Moses. Okay, listen. No man shall be able to stand before you in all the days of your life. Just as I was with Moses, so I will be with you. I will not leave you or forsake you. Be strong and courageous, for you shall cause, get this, you shall cause these people to inherit the land that I swore to their fathers to give them. Only be strong and very courageous, being careful to do according to all the law that Moses my servant commanded you. Do not turn from the right hand to the left, that you may have good success wherever you go. Are you getting these promises? I will not leave you. I will not forsake you. You shall cause the people to inherit the land. You may have good success wherever you go. Anybody want good success wherever you go? I'm thinking this is sounding pretty good. This book of the law shall not depart from your mouth, but you shall meditate on it day and night, so that you will be careful to do according to all that is written in it. Get this. For then you will make your ways prosperous, and then you will have good success. Have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be frightened. Do not be dismayed, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. Does that sound good? Are these promises sounding good to you? Are these the types of things where you're like, okay, so maybe you've prayed and prayed and prayed, and you're wondering how you go about doing something, and the Lord's just given you instructions if you want to be successful, and if you want to help others inherit things, and if you want to be prosperous in all of your ways. He's given you the instructions. One of my favorite quotes from Sean Smith, who we get to have here not too long from now, is, when God wants to move you up, he gives you an assignment. But when the devil wants to move you out, he gives you an alternative. So there is an alternative set of rules. In verse 12, he starts talking to the 2.5 tribes that were like, we're not sure we want to do this. These 2.5 tribes, here's what the promise is to these tribes. Remember the word that Moses, the servant of your Lord, commanded you, saying, the Lord your God is providing you a place of rest and will give you this land. Your wives and your little ones and your livestock shall remain in the land that Moses gave you beyond the Jordan. That's the other side. But when the men of valor among you shall pass over armed before your brothers and shall help them, until the Lord gives rest to your brothers as he has to you. And they also take possession of the land that the Lord your God is giving them. Then you shall return to the land of your possession and shall possess it. The land that Moses, the servant of the Lord, gave you beyond the Jordan toward the sunrise. So let's look at this. There's a promise given about a promised land that God says, I will give you that land. And 9.5 tribes are going to go over there and be able to live in the land of their promise. And there's these 2.5 tribes that have already asked for permission to not have to inherit on that side. They said, no, we're good over here. And if you look at the scriptures in the book of Numbers, it talks about their decision to ask for land on this side. Here's what they said. 32 verse 2. And they saw that the land of Jizar and the land of Gilead, and behold, the place was a place for livestock. They had lots of possession. And this land on this side, for these 2.5 tribes, it was a good land for their possessions. And so they wanted to stay there. And in Numbers, when they called the officials and Moses, and they said, can we not just stay here? And Moses got on their case a little bit and wondered why this separation, why staying here, why they would do that when it would discourage the ones that were supposed to go on to what the promise was. But he said, okay. He goes, here's what's going to happen. Your men of valor are going to still go fight with us. You're still going to go fight with us because I'm not going to let you discourage the heart. I'm still going to you're still going to come fight with us. And after you fight and after I give rest, I'll let you go back. I'll let you go back. Spirit wars, they compel a choice. You have to decide. We talked about authority not being control. God has authority, but he gave us free will. And so these 2.5 tribes, they were free to choose to stay in a land that man gave them, that Moses gave them. They're free to stay in a land that man gave them and settle for a land of their possession. There was a promise. There was promises, amazing promises, but they were free to settle there. Now I have to wonder why. If they were still willing to go fight, why would they not want what they were fighting for? They still had to go fight. But no, they saw this. This looked good. Maybe they were afraid. They didn't really trust the promise. Maybe they were afraid that they weren't going to get what was really over there. Maybe they were concerned that wasn't going to be as good. What they saw here was going to be okay. It was good for their cattle. It was good for their possession. So they're like, no, we'll stay here. Spirit wars compel a choice. We have to decide. Are we going to go full board with the promises of God, or are we going to settle? Are we going to settle because something looks okay? Are we going to settle because we're like, yeah, I can do this. Yep, I can raise a family like this. This is good. My cattle's got plenty of land to roam, and we'll build houses for our little ones and stuff. This will be fine. This we can do. It's good. Or are we going to take the risk to say, I might not see it yet, and I might not know all the struggle that's between there and here, but I'm going for it. If God said this is his promise for me, I'm not going to settle. I'm not going to decide that it's okay to do something less because this journey may be hard. I'm not going to decide that I'm unwilling to give up over here and fight some battles and do some things to get over here. What choice are we going to make? And then I want you to notice, when they made a choice and they kind of staked themselves and said, this is what we want. This is our land. They knew that the others were going on. We now begin to have some separation. We begin to have some division now. Now it's not they're all moving together. Remember in Joshua, it was you and all these people. Well, guess what? 2.5 of these people are like, we're not going to inherit over there. We're going to inherit over here. Remember that. We'll get back to that. So they were allowed to go in and to fight. and then they were going to be allowed to go back to the land that they thought they wanted, the land that they did want. So then in chapter 3, Joshua says to the people, consecrate yourselves, for tomorrow the Lord will do wonders among you. And Joshua said to the priests, take up the ark of the covenant and pass on before the people. So they took up the ark of the covenant and went before the people. Let me tell you, how many times did Joshua say, be strong and courageous? Be strong and very courageous. You know what? Spirit wars are just going to confirm your courage. It's going to confirm your courage. When you look at what happened here, as they began to take the ark and to go through, I love hearing stories where in the Bible, the ones where the water gets dammed up on either side and they walk through, right? But in this one, they're having to walk through. They know that there's battles ahead. They know that there's things ahead. And it says in verse 7, the Lord said to Joshua, today I will begin to exalt you in the sight of all Israel, that they may know that as I was with Moses, so I will be with you. And as for you, command the priests who bear the ark of the covenant, when you come to the brink of the waters of the Jordan, you shall stand in the Jordan. Can I tell you that their feet got wet? On this one, their feet got wet. It says that they ended up standing on dry ground in the middle. But to get there, their feet got wet. And Joshua said to the people of Israel, come here and listen to the words of the Lord your God. Verse 13, and when the soles of the feet of the priests bearing the ark of the Lord of all the earth, shall rest in the waters of the Jordan. The waters of the Jordan shall be cut off from flowing, and the waters coming down from heaven shall stand in one heap. Their feet had to get wet. They had to take the presence of the Lord and carry it into the water before it stopped. And sometimes we take the presence of the Lord up to the water and then we wonder, well, it's not parting. What's going on? We have to trust him just as much to part it when we're in the waters as we have to trust him to part it before we get to the waters. You may have to get your feet wet. It may be scary. You may not see God making that way that Pastor Barry talked about until you're in the thick of it. Do you have the courage to take those steps into the thick of the water, the Jordan, at the time when it could be flooding? Will you take that step into it and trust that God's going to make a way in the midst of it? We want him to make a way so often before it. I want to know before my bank account's low that God's got a check in the mail coming to me. I want to know before I take this great step of faith that we're going to be okay and things are going to happen and God's got it. But you know what? Sometimes he says, nuh-uh. Nuh-uh. Because he's not stressed. He knows what he's doing. He knows what you need. He knows what his plan is. It's not about him making a way to get you out of a mess or to avoid a mess. It's about him working on your heart in the midst of all of it. It's about him saying, are you going to trust me? Are you going to trust me? Are you going to trust me? I've debated on whether I was going to share this or not, but I'm going to. When we, as individuals and as a house, was praying for Michael and believing for a miracle for Michael, I very clearly felt like the Lord had put some things in my heart and deposited some things in my heart. And I'll be very honest, it felt like they were conflicting. And at one point, I posted on a thing, I felt like the Lord had given promises and spoken some things, and I posted on a thing of Facebook that they had for the family, and I posted, I refuse to relent. And he died a short time later. And I was wrestling with the Lord a little bit. I don't understand. I don't get it. Like, what? I know you told me to pray. I know you told me you told me those words, refuse to relent. Why? Can I tell you something? In that moment, it wasn't an instruction given to me because Michael was either going to rise up or not rise up. It was an instruction given to me to see if I would obey when it didn't look like the instruction made sense. When everybody's saying hospice and I'm saying, the Lord's saying, will you refuse to relent? You know what? It was about this heart. It was about this heart deciding, I don't care what it looks like, and I don't even tie it to the outcome. God, I'll just obey. I'll just obey. That's what this is. Will you have the courage to just obey? When the water's not parting and you know you've got the presence of God with you, you know what? Will you still go and stand in the midst of the water so that everybody else can walk through on dry land? Will you get your feet wet? Because if they hadn't gotten their feet wet, would everybody else be able to cross over into the promise? I was just out of my skin this morning with how many parts of what I knew God put on my heart everybody else had already said. Landon said it well. The harmony, the noise canceling, your frequency and what you're contending for others. You got to go stand in the midst of the water for those coming behind you. You got to get your feet wet or else they'll never stand on dry ground. Engaging in the spirit wars, it will confirm your courage. Let it. Take the step. Get your feet wet. So they did. Everybody passed over on dry ground. Chapter 5. And at that time the Lord said to Joshua, make flint knives and circumcise the sons of Israel a second time. Rules of engagement for spirit wars. It's going to cultivate consecration. Will you consecrate yourself? This was a tall order. This was a very intense demonstration of consecration. Keep in mind, they'd been being obedient. There's a difference between obedience and consecration. They'd been being obedient, but that's not enough. I have a 5-year-old. I know when they obey, but they don't want to obey. When the consecration of the heart hasn't happened, it's just pure obedience for fear of discipline, right? Obedience and consecration may be two different things. Consecration is deep. It's your heart. It's going to cost you something, and it's going to be uncomfortable. When the circumcising of the whole nation was finished, they remained in their place in the camp until they were healed. I need you to remember this for about 5 minutes from now, okay? Remember, they remained together in their places in the camp until they were healed. You remember that? Only about 5 minutes. We'll expand on that in about 5 minutes. They could have made excuses. They could have said, God is blessing us, so we're not going to do it. Why do we need even more? God's already blessing. We're doing good. You know, we just need to consecrate our hearts. So next comes the fall of Jericho. They did exactly what they were told to do in the midst of the fall of Jericho. And because they were consecrated and they were walking in obedience and all of these things, that they were able to engage the rules of heaven, and all of those promises that God had given in the beginning was happening. Chapter 6, verse 17. But you keep yourselves from the things devoted to destruction, lest when you have devoted them, you take away any of the devoted things and make a camp of Israel a thing of destruction and bring trouble upon it. They were told in the midst of being consecrated that as they go up to this next battle, to not take any of the devoted things, to not take any of those things. There wasn't supposed to be in their camp. And they had been consecrated ahead of time. God warned them, consecrate yourselves. Get your heart right with me. Make this agreement with me before you go and you face this next battle. But the people of Israel broke faith in regard to the devoted things, and they were taken. So about 3,000 men went up, and they lost. 36 of their men were killed. And Joshua is looking at this like, whoa, Lord, this is not what you promised. You said no man should be able to stand before us. You said that we'd have the victory. You said you'd give me every place that I step my foot. Where are these rules? Where are these promises, Lord, that you told us when we set out to do this? Why did you do this, Lord? Joshua came to find out that it was because their end of the bargain wasn't kept. There was sin in the camp. And it cost all of them. So often, we want to look at the promises of God and we want to see the side of the chart that says what he's going to do. Guess what? There's another side of the chart that says what we're supposed to do. And if it's not going according to the promises, I'm here to tell you it's not God that ain't living up to his end of it. It's us. We need to take a step back. We get disappointed. Oh, Lord, I don't understand why you let this happen. You promised this, and I'm not seeing your promises. What about, Lord, search my heart? What's going on? Do we recognize that not all of them took things, just some of them, and it caused an issue for all of them? It caused Joshua to doubt. Joshua didn't take anything, but it caused him to doubt. What we do impacts each other. That's part of the consecration. That's part of me saying, I'll consecrate my heart for your victory. I'll refrain from something I want to do for your victory. Get this. I lost my place in my notes. Verse 12 of chapter 7. Therefore, the people of Israel cannot stand before their enemies. They turned their backs before their enemies because they have become devoted for destruction. I will be with you no more unless you destroy the devoted things from among you. Get up, consecrate the people and say, consecrate yourselves for tomorrow. For thus saith the Lord God of Israel, there are devoted things in your midst, O Israel. You cannot stand before your enemies until you take away the devoted things from among you. Those promises that God's given you that involve things where there's enemies between you and it, you can't even stand before them until the devoted things that aren't devoted to God is removed from you. So much of it we think is God's timing, and I believe in God's perfect timing of things. But I also know that there's times I cause delay because there's devoted things here. Maybe I'm more concerned about the land of my possession than the promises. Maybe I'm more concerned about the wounds in my heart. Maybe I'm more concerned about what somebody's done to me, and I want to hold on to things. Whatever it is, until those devoted things are removed from me, I cannot stand before my enemies. I think sometimes that's why we fall, because we think we can. So I ask you, as we talk about consecration, we talk about our heart issues with consecration and being right before God. Are there devoted things? Have you committed yourselves to things devoted to destruction? Because if so, that, my friends, is the reason you cannot stand before your enemies. The good news is the promise is still there. As soon as they got rid of the things that were devoted to destruction, they realigned themselves in personal jurisdiction, subject matter jurisdiction, and God would say, cool, now we're back on track. Now my rules of heaven apply to this. Let's go. And they were victorious. God's promise didn't change. They just needed to align themselves. They needed to get rid of the devoted things. So they win victory in that city. They're fighting another battle, and God makes the sun stand still in the midst of that battle. God can do some cool things when he's on your side, right? So they win and they get to where they're supposed to be. Joshua chapter 22. And now the Lord your God has given rest to your brothers. I might have skipped over. Maybe not. Oh, I did. Let's look at chapter 21, verse 43. Thus the Lord gave to Israel all the land that he swore to their fathers. This is it, people. This is the fulfillment. And they took possession of it and they settled there where the promise was. And the Lord gave them rest on every side, just as he had sworn to their fathers. Not one of all their enemies had withstood them, for the Lord had given all their enemies into their hands. Not one word of all the good promises that the Lord had to the house of Israel had failed. All had come to pass. All had come to pass. And then he spoke to the 2.5 tribes. And he said, you have kept all that Moses, the servant of the Lord, commanded you. Not what God commanded, but what Moses had commanded you. And have obeyed my voice in all that I have commanded you. You have not forsaken your brothers these many days, down to this day, but have been careful to keep the charge of the Lord your God. They did what they were supposed to do. They did what they said they would do. If you let us stay here, we'll go fight. We'll go help them. We'll stay with them until they get to enter their rest. Great, you have done that. And now the Lord your God has given rest to your brothers as he promised them. Therefore, turn and go to your tents in the land where your possession lies, which Moses, the servant of the Lord, gave you on the other side of the Jordan. Okay, hear this. He gave very specific instruction. And I believe for a very specific reason. Do we understand that even though the 2.5 were going back and their wives and their littles were over there and they've gone and they fought this war and it was the 12, the mighty men from all 12 were fighting this war and they won. This is the sad moment. This is when they're now parting company, where the 2.5 had done what they were supposed to do and now they go back to the land of their possession, not the land of the promise. They go back. And because there's this separation, instruction. Only be very careful to observe the commandment and the law that Moses, the servant of God, commanded you. To love the Lord your God and to walk in all his ways and to keep his commandments and to cling to him and to serve him with all your heart and with all your soul. So Joshua blessed them and sent them away and sent them to their tents. Spirit wars, the rules of engagement for spirit wars, it craves covenant. There has to be covenant. And this, now, covenant is broken. They're leaving. They're settling. They're going back. And Joshua says, when you go, when you're separated from us, things happen when covenant breaks. And when you're separated from us, be on guard. You have to do everything. You have to walk super close with the Lord because covenant is now broken and things happen. Chapter 22. They built an altar. The 2.5 tribes going back, they built an altar of imposing size. This was an impressive altar. But it ticked off the 9.5 because they'd seen what had happened sometimes when altars get built that shouldn't have been built. And they're like, what in the world? So now the ones that fought together to go and to obtain the promise, now the 9.5 are looking at the 2.5 and they're like, what in the world? And they go approach them ready for war. Ready for war. They are mad because everything has now been jeopardized, right? We're back to potentially sin in the camp. They don't know what's going on. They just know they were leaving and now there's this big altar that they built. So they go and they're like, what in the world? Have we not had enough sin? Has enough stuff not happened already? And you're rebelling against the Lord today. He's going to be angry with the whole congregation of Israel. I need you to understand at this moment, the 9.5 are mad and they're scared and they're furious. And they went ready to wage war against the 2.5. Do you get the scene? Do you get the setting? Get this. In the midst of it, verse 19, but now, this is the 9.5 to the 2.5 that they think have just destroyed everything they've worked for. The 2.5 that is deciding they want to leave the 9.5 and go back to a lesser place. And here's the offer. But now, if the land of your possession is unclean, pass over into the Lord's land where the Lord's tabernacle stands and take for yourselves a possession among us. They're mad and land is already in this area. They've already divided land as to who gets what. It's like when you're buying a house and you walk in and the kids scatter. This is my room. This is my room. This is what's happening. They've already got all of their spaces divided. People are placing curtains and decorating and doing things like that. And the 9.5 go to the 2.5 that they're mad at and said, it's not too late. It's not too late. If that's not good for you, come be, we'll redistribute, we'll make room, we'll make it. Come be with us. They are craving covenant. Even when they're mad. Even when they're mad. Come back and be with us while they're angry. And they give a chance, which sometimes we don't do when we're angry. They give a chance for the 2.5 to say, no. We did not mean to build this altar to create problems. We're not doing it for that reason. That was not the point. We did it because we were afraid that in the time to come, your children are going to judge ours. Your children might say to our children, what have you to do with the Lord, the God of Israel? Now there's fear. They're afraid that they're going to be judged over here and they're not going to be recognized for what they've done. And their kids won't be recognized for what they've done. See what happens when we break covenant? See the crazy thoughts that we think when we break covenant? These guys had gone to war with them. They were just as important to win the battle over here. And now they're thinking our children, no, it's not going to be known what we did. Your kids, the cousins at family reunions, it ain't going to be pretty. They were afraid. When we break covenant, it brings fear, brings separation, brings misunderstanding. Verse 26 of chapter 22, therefore, we said, this is the 2.5 explaining themselves. Let us now build an altar, not for burnt offerings nor for sacrifice, but to be a witness between us that you and between our generations after us, that we do perform the service of the Lord in his presence with our burnt offerings, with sacrifice and peace offerings, so that your children will say to our children in times to come, so our children will not say to our children in times to come, you have no portion with the Lord. They needed an outward sign because there's some inward turmoil. There is such a connection between covenant and consecration. And if we can just be really real for a minute, it is in covenant that we can often experience our greatest wounds and our greatest pains. We get hurt. And it goes deep because we're in covenant. It goes deep because I love you. It goes deep because we're doing something together. It goes deep because there's so much of kingdom that is resting on relationship. That when we get hurt bad. There can be great pain within covenant. How many of you have also experienced great healing within covenant? It can be such a place of great covenant, because the people you're in covenant with, they can come and they know you, and they know what to do, and they can help, and they can walk with you, and they can ask, and they can be like, are you okay? And what do you need? And they know your insecurities, and they know your strengths, and they can speak to both. There is great healing within covenant, but I gotta tell you, when we are hurt within covenant and we choose to run, we never get over here. We never get to that healing. If we break covenant out of pain, we don't get always to go back and get the freedom that covenant can bring. If we're going to be really real for a minute, how many of you have been hurt at times in marriage? It happens, right? How many of you kids have been hurt at times by your parents? Parents, you've been hurt by your kids. It happens, right? We get to talk about this. How many of you have been hurt in church life? I've been here since the end of 2004. Been on staff. Gosh, I don't even know when all of that started. Probably at least 12, 13 years now. We've had staff members come and go. We've had people in church come and go. I've been hurt, and I'm sure I've done my fair share of hurting. And truth be told, I know that there's areas of my life where I let that hurt stop me. I took it and I made a big old excuse around that pain and said, I can't go forward. I get to settle with the 2.5 because this happened to me. I'm not sure after the summer, after some things that God's done recently for the last couple of years, I'm not sure I've ever walked in a place of feeling more whole and more healed from pain. And we've walked through, this church has been betrayed by people. We've had crazy things happen around this place. But I know I'm healed because my excuses are gone. And I'm prepared to take the risk and do some things that I had held back and I had been like, nuh-uh, because of this. But I would never have the healing in my heart that I have if I ran. The place that the covenant relationship, this place that maybe was the root of some pain, certainly became the place of my healing from that pain and my freedom from that pain and my consecration of my heart to say, I'm not holding on to the junk anymore. We're going forward. And I got to tell you, I know that there's people over the course of the time here and the history that I've had here that I've been a part of why they were hurt. And I've seen them leave. And I've seen them since, and they're not walking in wholeness, and they're not walking in healing, and they're not walking in freedom because they left to stop the pain instead of staying and digging in and deciding I'm here until I get my wholeness from it. Because I believe that where the place of the pain was, if I stay in covenant, this is the place of my healing. We won't see it if we run, if we break covenant. Nothing good comes from that. And I'm not saying, hear me, I'm not saying that there's not a time and a place where people have to move on. And I'm not saying that there's not a time and a place, even in marriages sometimes, where for safety, maybe even for life, that things need to adjust or there needs to be a parting of the ways. But I'm telling you that we run too often. And we run too often because we're in pain or because we're scared or because we're prideful or we refuse to say, this is me. And I've made mistakes too. And there's been pain. And I've done this or whatever. But let's fix it together. Let's grow together. If you want to engage in spirit wars, stick in with the covenant. Don't break it. chances are you'll be offended at some point. Chances are, and rightfully so, chances are feelings will be hurt, toes will be stepped on. I know it happens because it's happened to me and I know I've done it. But we can get freedom from it if we'll stick, if we'll stay together. There is no reason for anybody here to give up on the promise and decide that you're settling for the land of your possessions. Your possessions ain't worth it. It's not worth it. Just because it's good for your possessions doesn't mean it's what God has for you. And if there's frustration in the midst of it, guess what? It's because you've settled. It was good for the cattle. That's great. But what's good for me? What does my God have in store for me? It's here in the land of promise, walking in covenant with a consecrated heart, with courage, and saying, I make the choice to go forward and do whatever it looks like, whatever God has said we're going to do. Rules of engagement for Spirit Wars. Will you make a choice? Do you have courage? Get your feet wet? Will you consecrate your heart to the point where sometimes it just hurts? And then will you walk in covenant with your God, but with your people, with your tribe, with the ones he said, y'all are doing this together. I will tell you that there have been words over this house that we need all of your frequencies to make happen. And there's people that aren't here anymore where their frequencies were needed. Not just for us, but for them. I will tell you, I can remember certain times where I very intentionally, whether it was my covenant relationship here with Crosspoint and the people, or it was and the family, or it was my covenant relationship with my kids, or my covenant relationship with my husband, where very intently I had to say, nah, this isn't breaking us. This isn't breaking us. We're doing this together. It's not always easy. It's not always pretty. It's rarely pretty. Let's just be honest. It's rarely pretty, but it's incredibly beautiful. So I want to ask you, as we launched into the next series in the weeks to come of some of our weapons and some of our tactical things that we do to fight spirit wars and win, right? Because we know we're going to win. Can we agree on the rules of engagement? Can you ask yourself for a moment if there's a spot in these rules of engagement where maybe you are hesitating? Maybe you've been stopped. Even at the very end, when they were the most angry, they were saying, it's not too late. It's not too late. Come on, come with us. No matter where maybe we've stopped along the way, it's not too late. It's not too late. Jesus is still saying, come with us. In my house, I still love that movie, The Greatest Showman. I know y'all love The Greatest Showman, right? You just kind of have to love that movie. And I drive my family crazy, but you know that bar scene where they're talking and they're like, hey, like, you can come and do this. Like, come with me and do this. Like, break out of your cage and come and do this, right? And there's a line I always hear that song as Jesus singing to us. Saying, hey, you can come and do like I do. And there's a line, and I love it, and it says, and if it's crazy, live a little crazy. So today, as we get ready, as we continue in a season that's not just a sermon series, in a season for our church history at this moment, at this time, to say we are engaging in supernatural warfare like we haven't before. We're taking literal territory. We're literally going to heal land and kick the devil's butt. Yes, I said butt in church. I said butt, period. We're going to kick the devil, and we're going to do this, and we're going to do this together. And I believe that there's an acceleration coming for the region based upon what we do. It's not just a sermon series. This is a season of life of what God's doing in our region. Will you engage? Will you engage? If you haven't made a choice, make a choice. So we're going to end, and I just want to pray. And I want you to just be really, really honest with yourself and with each other, because we're going to take a moment. I got to tell you, I would imagine all of those people getting circumcised together. That's quite an experience to walk through together. Remember when I asked you to? Okay, let's just go there for a second. Ladies, can you even imagine, like, how many of you are married to somebody that when they've got the sniffles or they're sick, like it's just all over, right? Can you imagine that? Oh my goodness. But remember, I asked you to remember that they stayed together in their place until they were healed. I think I need to offer you an escort. I'll give you a heads up, and you feel free to hide before No, I'm just kidding. If you've been hurt, I want us to stay together in our place until we're healed. So let's just be really vulnerable for a moment, forever. And if you feel like there's some choices that you need to make differently, you feel like that rule of engagement, you need to adjust. You've chosen comfort over promise. If you feel like that's where you're set, and let me tell you this, it's not you get past one to go the other, all four of these all times. So if you feel like you've been stuck because you've made choices that have disengaged rather than engaged, stand to your feet. And just so that you know, I'm standing. Because I know I made choices to coddle hurt, and I know I made choices to protect, and choices for safety, and choices for all of these things that disengaged in some way. So I'm standing with you. If you just need the courage, it's just scary. God's called you to something and you know it, but you're a little scared. And you don't know how to make that first step, and you're afraid you're going to do the wrong thing versus the right thing, and you just don't want to mess it up. You just need courage. That's where you're at. Stand to your feet. And again, I'm standing with you. If you need to consecrate your heart, and this doesn't necessarily mean that you're overtaken, and for some reason the ones that the church describes are the big old sins and this and that. You just need to consecrate your heart. You need to decide that the land of your possession isn't worth the land of your promise. That you're going after that, and you don't care what it's like for your cattle, and you don't care what it's like for all of those types of things. You're consecrating your heart, and you're saying, Lord, whatever it costs, I'll sacrifice. I'll sacrifice reputation. I'll sacrifice rights. I'll sacrifice possessions. Whatever it is, God, I'll sacrifice. I'll consecrate my heart. I'll make an agreement with you that I'm going to keep my heart pure. I won't devote myself to the things of destruction anymore. Or maybe you're at a place where you're like, I just don't know if I can trust again, and I don't know what covenant looks like anymore. And it still sounds really good to maybe be with that 2.5, because there's a lot less likelihood that I'm going to get hurt. Or I've been that 2.5, or I haven't, and my motives constantly get misinterpreted, and I've been hurt, and people don't understand, and I don't feel known, and it's this covenant thing that makes me want to back up, and maybe even makes me want to turn and run. I will tell you, I believe one of the biggest tools of the enemy is isolation. And the opposite of isolation is not popularity, and it's not being around a lot of people. The opposite of isolation is connection. I recently heard someone say even that the opposite of addiction is connection. If you'll trust God that He can take care of the wounds in your heart, the ones that have happened, the ones that are there right now, and quite honestly, the ones that are to come. Because I'm not promising you with covenant, it means that there's no more wounds and there's no more injury. I'm pretty much promising you with covenant, there are more wounds and there are more injury, but there's the healing and the freedom from it that comes with the covenant. It's worth it. It's worth it. If that's where you've been hiccuped, you're not walking in covenant. Stand to your feet. And again, I'd say on that one that I'm standing with you. God, I thank you that your promises for us are fantastic. God, I thank you that that promised land is worth it. God, I thank you that it is your desire to bless us, that there'll be good success wherever we go, that there's healing, that there's prosperous, that we're going to help others inherit the land. God, I ask you to heal. I ask you to grow our faith. I ask you to give us courage, to consecrate our hearts. Help us. God, be so loud in our ear when we're making a choice that's not good for consecration or covenant. God, and I ask that you let this church family take possession of the land of promise in this season. God, and in the midst of it, would you bring back ones that have been hurt? God, can you restore covenant with ones that are supposed to be here with us? Father, and if we've left a covenant to come here, God, can you help us some way, somehow, to experience freedom from those wounds? And if it means we need to reach out, let us reach out. Let us take courage. I tell my police officers and firefighters that I chaplain for, I tell them that in this day and age, there's no reason to be hiccuped by a call. There's more than enough resources to walk whole and healthy after rough calls or rough experiences. I'm going to tell you, there is no reason in this environment to walk wounded. Father, bring healing and help us to fully engage you and the battle and promises that you have for us.